supposed to put this on?
No, you don't have to. You can use the one at the podium.
Okay.
Can you see this one?
Yes, this is good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Amy and Colleen, for your graciousness, and thank you for taking the time to come out. Let's hope that the experience proves as worthwhile as my stay so far has been. I'm going to speak a little bit about something that I consider to be quite important, not only from the standpoint of what it means for people being empowered to shape their own lives, but also what it means for higher education and for student learning and for knowledge making. So let me just tell you a little bit why this is important. Within the last year, the leadership of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, the leadership with the Davos World Economic Forum, and the World Bank, and last week Janet Yellen from the Federal Reserve, have all declared that their organizations accept as an emerging policy view that inclusive and broad-based growth, shared prosperity, and enhanced social protection of those who are most vulnerable in society is foundational to creating socially just and sustainable economic development and well-being development, both globally and locally. Yet, this new awareness on the part of all these leaders has not led to an abatement of the rising inequalities that we have seen over the last couple of years, both locally and internationally, nor have they come up with solutions in how to address the underlying problematic and the societal challenges that they pose. Against this background, everyone is looking to higher ed to find a solution. How can it modernize its public good and engage society in youth-inspired scholarship to redress the situation? My discussion today is going to hold that globalization and rapid technology change have hastened interconnectedness of disparate societies and disrupted traditional economic and social relations, and in so doing increased the human inequalities and vulnerabilities globally and locally. For example, the Arab Spring and Occupy movement that took place, though very, very different, were motivated in part by discontent within these growing inequality trends. That is, inequality creating polarization leading to these things. As we speak right now, according to the IMF, the top 5% of the global population holds over 35% of all global wealth. Sorry, the top half of a percent holds over 35% of wealth. In some countries like Canada, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States, inequality has soared in the last 25 years. In fact, in the United States now, we're back to the 1928 income distribution pattern, and for the first time in modern history in the United States, we are ranked last among industrial countries in the probability of someone born in the bottom percentile having a chance to have any social progress. That is the first time, and that's a major threat to the American dream. So we can talk a little bit about the kind of global trends, and I think that's important. And in fact, my work on Jamaica in building the Jamaican economy and having the IMF change their policies to accept it addresses this. What I'm going to speak on today, however, is what happens at the community level. What does this mean at the community level? My thesis is a simple one: strengthening the capacity of residents to exercise voice, agency, and accountability over community affairs, enable them to create a community that is socially valuable, resilient, desirable, malleable, dynamically competitive, and able to sustain its growth and development path. giving them voice and agency over their affairs, allow them to create the communities that they value and make those communities be dynamically competitive. In this framework, residents have an informed perspective, and 2-3 weeks ago in making this presentation, two former presidents of very well-known institutions pulled me aside and say they really support everything I say, but I wouldn't get through the gates of their university. So after I make my thesis, I will see whether I get kicked out immediately, right? Since I'm already through the gates. So in this framework, and I carefully presented, residents have an informed perspective on their capacity and scope for economic and social development, and clarity on what role their own effort, if empowered, can play in relationship to their partnerships with government or philanthropic organizations. Under this calculus, all of the things being held equal, the greater the capacity and empowerment of residents, and the higher the transaction costs associated with government participation or any third-party action, the more limited should residents make government action be. If government action cannot be accounted for, if it is opaque, then residents should reduce government in their lives, and they should rely on their own agency for their well-being and development aspirations. This is not against government, but I'm contending that my thesis intrinsically and instrumentally gives benefits to residents, right? Because it gives them critical feedback, right, on what is the meaning of their ownership and accountability, right, for their own lives, and also it gives them feedback on how they should engage third parties like government. This all will make sense as I go through my case studies, and you will see where they have done exactly that. Understand their capacity for their own agency and well-being, and let that then determine the residual role that government should play in their lives. In other words, don't start with government primacy, what government can do, and then we try to maximize our lives. Start with what we can do, and then what is it we need government to partner with us on? Education, healthcare, infrastructure, crime, all of that kind of stuff. So it is not against government, but instead it is understanding the limits that we should place on government. My presentation is going to discuss how the capacity of residents to exercise this kind of agency in pursuit of their own development, right, benefits from collaborations with higher ed. I call this kind of collaboration interdisciplinary public scholarship. So I'm arguing that interdisciplinary public scholarship is going to be essential to residents being able to make choices over their lives. I define interdisciplinary public scholarship as knowledge making through collaborative co-learning about, with, and for diverse communities and publics. It's co-learning, collaborative co-learning about, with, and for diverse publics and communities. I argue that this creates synergies and synthesis between traditional academic scholarship that you do in the classroom, right, and multiple types of intelligence and knowledge, including experiential knowledge, that you find in the community. And it also is sensitive to the cultural imperatives that are foundational to community stakeholders. It is mindful of their cultural imperatives and their cultural norms. It therefore creates new kinds of consilient knowledge on community issues that can be used for problem solving and determining communities' capacity and empowerment to engage in own agency on behalf of their own aspirations. So I'm relocating the notion that strengthening communities to be agents of their own lives is the critical factor that will allow us to solve the issue of how do you have inclusive, broad-based, and just growth and development. That without that, we can't. And I can, again, I'm going to go through some examples to show it, right? But just in terms of what it means, I argue that this form of knowledge making and problem solving is especially important where ecological, social, or economic distress, like I saw in my work in New Orleans, Lower Ninth Ward after Katrina, like I saw in my work in Honduras when it became a place of incredible violence, like I now see in my work in Central Appalachia after coal has died and everyone is vulnerable. So I argue that where ecological, social, or economic distress has rendered community members vulnerable and with diminished ability to satisfy their basic needs or respond to setbacks or shocks, thus restricting their social, economic, and civic development. They cannot develop because of these things. These aggravated human vulnerabilities and deprivations, if you look at the Human Development Report for this year, it speaks specific to overcoming vulnerabilities because there's a recognition that vulnerability drives underdevelopment. These aggravated human vulnerabilities and deprivations, if left undressed, and here's the kicker, if left undressed, you get up every day, you are vulnerable, if left undressed, and by the way, Roosevelt's Economic Bill of Rights was aimed at addressing these things. Necessitous men are dangerous men, and he went through to explain why we need to create security, economic security. So if left undressed, these situations often results in residents in the communities downgrading their aspirations and capacities, and in the words of Martha Sen, adjusting their desires and expectations about their lives to what they unambitiously see as feasible. Adjusting and downgrading themselves to what they see as what they unambitiously see as feasible. You know, we hear the fox can't get the grape, the fox say it is sour. Well, in our real life, if when you get up and you work hard and you cannot achieve, when you cannot exercise agency, for your own sense of emotional stability, you downgrade your expectations. So you then start suffering from what we call resigned preferences. You've resigned yourself to low order preferences. And that then adds a layer of complication. It goes with when polarization sets in. How do you overcome it when you try development? So I argue that these derivative bounded imaginations, I spent a lot of time talking to people throughout Richmond, and I hear a lot of bounded imaginations. The inability to imagine a future that is different from the past. So you are bounded in your imagination of what is possible. And your resigned preferences, you've resigned yourself to lower order preferences because you are systematically being denied an opportunity to engage in agency. These things create a vital opportunity for interdisciplinary public scholarship and higher ed institutions like Richmond with their outside lens and perspectives to help abate these unfreedoms. You now have an opportunity to, from the outside, help to change the lens because you can see the potential. This is the core of my work, asset mapping. Understanding latent assets and helping communities to appreciate the risks of their assets and the exchange it can create to do things. So I argue that it connects communities' voice to their entrepreneurship, and it promotes a kind of an inclusive and socially just development, right? Making their welfare depend on this. You know, it then goes to what my favorite writer is Elaine Scarry. I don't know if anyone's familiar with her work, right? But she has written this wonderful essay called The Difficulty of Imagining Our People, right? And it's really quite powerful. But in institutions trying to help imagine the possibilities, the real danger, right? And that's why we link it back to this engagement. The real danger, right, is that outside institutions like Richmond, like Lafayette, may start imagining other people's welfare through their generous and wise imagining, because they are well-meaning and better resourced. So the notion of interdisciplinary public scholarship, where you have to look back and engage, is the basis that ensures and affirms dignity for the community, because we place primacy on their positions, not ours. We have to be weightless in our engagement to them, and it allows them to create important liberties that they have reasons to value. Okay, so later on, if we get into the Q&A, I may speak a little bit about how institutions benefit from this, right? What I will say is that all of my students and my student teams who have worked with this, they've been prestigious scholarship winners. They've gone on to Columbia, to Harvard, to the Haas School of Business. They've gone on to the top jobs. In other words, I noticed that Cornell University has just now launched a new program, $150 million. Anyone saw that? 2 weeks ago, New York Times story, Cornell University has decided now to create a program called Engage Cornell, which is all about what we do for every single Cornell undergraduate to now have an experience in public scholarship and engaged learning outside of the country or outside of Cornell, and they're going to do exactly what we do. But Cornell was really good about it. They didn't even say it's to save the world. They just said it's to make our students more competitive. So it is clear that they understand there is an instrumental private benefit as well as a public benefit. So we will talk a little bit about that. Okay, so I started this initiative called EEGLP, Economic Empowerment and Global Learning Project, and this little thing that you see right here, actually I bought on the streets in Jamaica from our vendor in 1989. It has now become an incredible symbol of agency. You control the world in your hands, you can do with it what you want. And after President Clinton acknowledged our work in 1987 for our work in New Orleans, and my institution saw important value in it and let it be the lead store on their website for 4 months. This symbol, now, you know, the man who was still selling on the street said, wow, I've gone global, you know, right? So it is there. But I'm going to talk a little bit about, though I can make reference to 3 projects, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use interdisciplinary public scholarship with our project now in Appalachia, right, to create value. And then I will refer to some of the other examples as we go along. So what we try to do with interdisciplinary public scholarship is to identify and commoditize. And I'm telling you these words because they're the words that got thrown out last 2 weeks ago. I try to identify and commoditize that dangerous market word. Social and exchange values of a community's tangible and foundational assets. So I try to go in and to discover their assets, working with them, and to identify it and to commoditize it, and then to use these assets for the purpose of their economic development and to strengthen their resilience to shocks. I use the EEGLP paradigm as a vehicle for the interdisciplinary public scholarship, right? And I will now focus on a couple of our cases. So I'm going to run through, and if you can tell me when I'm going too fast. Okay. Did I turn it off? Did I turn it off? Okay. Oh, I go this way. All right, good. Okay. So here is the EEGLP philosophy. As you can see, it has 3 overlapping things to it. Emphasis on development as an expansion of people's capacity to live lives of dignity and freedom. Remember, it's a vehicle through which I do interdisciplinary public scholarship. Models that focus on self-agency, human capital transfer, and investment in individuals in their own lives as foundations for their sustainable development and freedoms. And pedagogical challenge in students to be global citizens rather than members of local and national communities. So we integrate all those things, and that's the vehicle that we then use public scholarship through. These are the steps that make it integrative. So we collaborate and assess the community's needs, identify their goals, scope of the project. We identify and assess available resources, evaluate and prioritize, select preference solutions, implement solutions, and go back to the community for them to sign off. So throughout, we work with the community. These are just steps, right, that we do. This especially was useful when we're doing projects in rural areas, rural communities, right? Infrastructure projects, which suffer from a lot of people who want to get the benefit. You can't force people who benefit to pay for it, right? And so you get a free rider problem, and this is one of the things which have solved it, right? And this, I'm going to focus on our project in Appalachia, right? This is old Appalachia, right? And we work with Apple Shop. 45 years of a real social justice organization, and they do things. This is Appalachia. Apple Shop has film and video, so we go there. All these silos exist. They have a film and video production, right? They have an Apple Shop recording studio. They have a roadside theater, right? They all have their own management. They don't talk to each other, but they all are excellent individually and running a high cost. They have a radio station, the most popular radio station across Central Appalachia. If any of you heard my podcast, this is one who did it, and it's popular across there. Bad talking Jamaican, talking across Central Appalachia, and you know, they have archives, 200 documentary films on the humanness of life in Central Appalachia. And they have my favorite AMI, Appalachia Media Institute, which has over 1,000 young people who have learned the skills to document humanness through films, right? And they've all gone on to many good schools for that. 86% of the 1,000 young persons have gone on to college in an area where they suffer all different kind of things. This is their founding generation, right? This is their new generation. That's who we work with, right? Young people who have come back to fight and take a stance, exercise voice and agency. This is my team. Right? You know, I have a Nigerian immigrant, I have a young lady from Philadelphia, I have a girl who doesn't know where she's from because her dad has lived all over traveling past her, you know. I have a colleague who, you know, after going into Wall Street, after finishing up his PhD and rising very quickly and opening his hedge fund and selling it for $500 million, he decides to come and do what he's passionate with now, so he spends all of his time in the deep hills with me, right? Trying to do what he enjoys. I have a person, you know, does that. I have the founder of Roadside Theater there, right? And this is part of the work. These are founders, what we do, but these are the young people that we're working with. This is the work. So, the hardest part of the work is it took us 6 months to negotiate a memorandum of understanding. We were invited from as early as October last year, and we only go by invitation, and if you want, I can give you a copy of the letter of invitation, right? And then after the invitation, we negotiate on the phone, because it's really important that they understand that, one, I have all the friends in the world I need, and I am not interested in making any more new friends. Two, if they're not going to own their experience, they're wasting my time. Three, the only profit that I get from any one of these experiences is my students learning. And if my students don't increase their learning and learn something new, it's a waste of their time and my time, and we walk out. So the MOU that we sign, it states it very clear. Our profit is our students learning. The moment that we believe that we are not getting a return on our investment, here we do. It states it. And they state our profit is we build our capacity for agency, and the moment that we think we no longer are strengthening our capacity, we ask you to do. And it's stated in the MOU. And the MOU is an incredibly powerful act of ownership and clarity on what we're going to be doing. Now, I run to the end and I come back. The end of this is that this is an extraordinary project, because we've done a project we just submitted last week, Friday, to the Department of Commerce Economic Development Agency, a major proposal. We're going to be converting Whiteburg into the first culture hub into the entire Central Appalachia. And we have now put in place all this kind of investment, which works going to add an additional $2.5 to $3 million to the city of Whitesburg coffers. But let's see how we get there. Because we're talking about Hillbillies. Huh? Long people with beard who are not supposed to have any sense. So what are we talking about? They're going to contribute $2.5 to $3 million because they're going to be invested in their assets. That's how we get there. This is our path. Apple Shop's path to sustained prosperity. This is what we do for asset mapping. We go in and we look at, so this is all done by our students. And my entire team, every student today except for one, was just finished their first year in college. So I essentially work with freshmen and sophomores. Right? So the initial conditions, this is just an overview, right? Is we look at the assets of the county. We look at the assets for Apple Shop. What are the core assets? What are the derived assets? What are the instrumental assets? What are the capital assets? Right? Very important to look at those distinctions. Core versus derived versus instrumental. We break up their assets. Look at those things all represent a different way of doing things. We look at the modes, which are the tools, the triple bottom line, right? RAIN, implant, cluster mapping, all those are things that are being used by the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's the most modern way for us to frame how communities create value. We work with the Department of Commerce in using all those models. This is the models that if you go on the U.S. Department of Commerce website right now, these are the models that they use to assess a community's capacity. And so my students work with the Department of Commerce and learned all these things. And we use it as we work with Apple Shop, right? And then we look at opportunities, synthetic and synergistic. The quickest way to understand this is synergistic would mean that we take existing assets and we learn to create greater value by having them work better. So we realize that you are working in philosophy, but you really could be better off in management in terms of the value you create for the institution. So we shift you into management and we get a greater value for the institution. And so on and so on and so on. So when we talk about synergistic, we take all these assets, their Media Institute, their roadside theater, this and that, and we say, okay, probably the people who made the documentary film could actually travel out to a company and say, our roadside institute can come and hear your stories, make a documentary film about it, and our Media Institute make a documentary film, and we create that value. So you can understand how to modernize your practice. So we combine existing assets to create value. That's synergistic. Synergy. Synthetic is different. Synthetic is when we now marry an outside asset with inside assets to create new market value. So, what do I mean by this? Okay, I like to give this story. You all know what Grand Theft Auto is. People have heard me talk about it. You have heard of Grand Theft Auto, right? You have heard of Grand Theft Auto, right? You know what it is, right? It's, what is it? Huh? It's awful. Right? It's awful, right? So if you're taking the worst culture of, the worst and perverse culture of urban inner city, and you've combined with a software, and you've created a game that makes suburban kids go and drop their pants and walk and say, look at me, I'm a gangster, I'm tough, I'm bad, look what I've done. And they feel empowered. Huh? King of the world. Great. Now, just imagine, here we have a cultural organization that is teaching about Appalachian culture. We now take my students in work with studying, we created something called, we recognize that one of their core values, right? One of their core values, these are just the way we do it, core values, core assets, authentic voice. The way one speaks to oneself leads to knowledge creation, speech with action, exercising speech, exit, voice, and loyalty. Searching for truth, Appalachian humanness and connectedness, relatedness globally, allow for expressions and value of culture, gives you agency, preservation of culture. These are all the things that they were doing, which were the undertone to everything that you saw. Their roadside theater, their media institute, their film production. The core to all of those things were these values. They were values driven. And so here were we now seeing smart MIT Artificial Intelligence Unit, smart Harvard School of Education, coming and hiring 8 young people from Appalachia, Shop, to work on a project, an NSF project. You know what it is? NSF, Harvard, Cambridge, what am I missing? So we said, let us interrogate. So we call up Mr. Harvard PhD, Mr. MIT PhD, and say, you know, we gotta talk. What's going on here? Because all you do is you're paying them $80 an hour, and they say, oh my gosh, I've gotten paid this amount, and with this we can buy 50 chickens and we can be all right. Bound to imagination. Can't imagine their greatness. So we start talking, and we realize that they had run a success, and I have it here, I have the NSF write-up, and I saw the write-up. They went and they hired these Appalachian youngsters to play their game and code their game and adjust their games. And what was their game? They were making a game in the same spirit of Grand Theft Auto, a game to sell to high schools across America for anti-bullying. They drop the values of consilience and the values of people working together and the values of people problem solving. So they come to the core values of Appalachia. And they took those values and they built a software around it and did a successful pilot. So we said, now we're going to negotiate because these are assets, not labor. And so we have launched a new company, Mountain Tech and Technology, in which the hospitals in Appalachia, these Harvard and these folks, other folks, and $750,000 now have been invested, and part of our proposal to the Department of Commerce is for this new technology project, and the technical university here is now going to be training people in these skills, because all of a sudden, Appalachian humanness is an asset. Just the way how perverse behavior that went to Grand Theft Auto was an asset. And so now we're negotiating with school districts across the country, with organizations like Army and Navy, and with top-down organizations which naturally lead to bullying. Naturally to bullying. And you can now take this organic core asset. That's why they had to travel from Cambridge to Kentucky and bypass everybody else, because they realized that the core assets could not be found anywhere else. It is because of the hardship that these people had learned to negotiate differences and keep focused. Now it has become an asset. I mean, it's a little bit like reggae music where I'm from. Reggae music come out of hardship. Then when people get rich, they can't sing reggae music anymore. They sing about love and happiness. It's not about crisis anymore. So probably when Appalachia becomes rich, they may lose some of these core things because they no longer negotiate differences. They can buy their big house and lock themselves up inside of it, right? But for now, right, so these were their core assets. Here are their derived assets. Roadside Theater, WMMT, Media Institute, the archives, the music projects, the CTAP Festival. So all of these assets came out of their core assets. It was the values of their core assets that led to these derived assets. And these derived assets then allow them, right, to create these other values. Innovation and knowledge creation, right? This and that, financial stability. In other words, they could now achieve instrumental benefits by using their core and derived assets. In other words, they could, if they understood their value creation, their value proposition, they could drive their own development if they understood what was valuable about what they did. What was valuable about what they did, which is the basis of the proposal to the Economic Development Administration. in terms of building this. And if you notice, if you go back and look at these things, if you look at all these things, what you should be seeing is you should be seeing now, what's his name, who writes on, you should be seeing Michael Porter cluster analysis. You should be seeing what's his name, who writes on the rise of the rise of the creative class. What's his name? Richard Florida, rise of the creative class. You should be seeing in it the environment that you just read in the New York Times yesterday that allows young people to want to be a part of a community. The creative class, the ability to go in and to create value, the ability to be a part of value creation in all these ways. So you notice that the new generation I'm dealing with, all of them studied at Harvard and Yale and and Wesleyan and NYU and Hampshire College, and they all have come back. Everyone that represents the new class have all come back to now be part of this new movement. And all we are doing now is saying to them, let us talk about how we can marketize it, create value in exchange, allow you to commoditize it, and allow you to decide how it can create value. Don't let folks come from Cambridge and get the value. Don't let them get your value and pay you wages for your assets. Don't let them do that. So then, of course, to give them the impact of it, we then show them, if they do it for themselves, what is their economic impact analysis, right? And as you can see, in the end, the total effect, they create almost $3 million worth of value for their community if they were to build out their own product. Right? And I can go through our economic impact analysis, what we do. This is just how it works, right? Right, we use it to drive the EDA proposal, and just goes through the impact analysis on the county, right? And then now, here's my favorite thing. Here now is the structure of the map, right? We're gonna do it now. So here's the structure. We're gonna find a new economy for Apple Shop. We're gonna find a new economy for the Appalachian region. Find a new economy for arts and humanities. I didn't put together this. This was put together by the Imagine America Consortium of Colleges, 100 colleges and universities. They came to our presentation, and after listening to our presentation, they mapped the role of higher education in creating value, and they mapped and said, this is what we heard. So I didn't even do this. This was an outsider listening to our discussion, mapping its value. So we're going to tap Apple Shop core assets. It's going to, the authentic voices and that, it's going to create a culture hub, right? Culture hub. But we're going quickly to a culture hub, right? Culture hub. Culture hub will focus on activities related to the creation, development, production, protection, coordination, distribution of Appalachian culture and creative goods and services for local, regional, national, international consumption chain. In other words, you're capturing the value chain around their unique culture that they've shown. That's like Jamaica trying to get the benefit of reggae music. Appalachians are trying to get the benefit of this unique Appalachian humanness that they have, right? Now, here's what is cool now, right? Here is Mountain Media. These are hillbillies. People who have no sense, right? Stereotype. Here is a company, this is their company, their words, what they have written, we have not touched it. This is part of their proposition. They're going to create a for-profit arm of Apple Shop. It will be offer multimedia production and editing, web design, networking solution, and specialized crowdsourcing services that require high culture and language proficiencies. The firm will serve two primary customer segments with two distinct service offerings: comprehensive technology and media services to small and medium-sized businesses in Central Appalachia, customized crowdsourcing solutions to medium and large-sized businesses. Right? It's based off a successful pilot launched by the Giant Auto Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. With us on that. In other words, they get it. They get how their assets can now create a business and help businesses across Central Appalachia now have the ability to reach new markets. Because they already have young people learning how to do documentary film. Young people learning how to express themselves through plays. They know how to keep artifacts. They know how to do this, and to do all that. Now they put it into a market company. There's certain things that they're doing, but they're also understanding how to create now a synthetic product called Mountain Tech and Media. Not a synergistic, a synthetic. They're bringing technology in now to create value. And the same roadside theater that we're talking about, roadside theater now is now doing the same thing, and they're now going to be offering residencies all across the US. Because roadside theater was being brought in to go to New Hampshire when the school there, that famous school there, was in crisis. They went to do a one-year residency to help bring peace. They were sent to a school in Arizona when they're in crisis to go help bring peace. They're sent to this big school in Ohio to go bring peace. So they've always been brought in to help with their technology, their way, to help people learn to get along. But they never made a business out of it. And they could, between these young people on the making of a documentary, they could now go out to places, use their technology, get their first voice, get it out there, make a play, tape it, show it, reflect it, create all different kind of values. In that particular case, synergistic. That's done nothing but make better use of what their existing resources. And those two things, and along with the Culture Hub, is the basis now of the proposal to the Department of Commerce, which I expect to succeed. So, what are the lessons I've learned from all of this? And by the way, we've had the same experience in Honduras, where we turned $500, 2 minutes? Oh, yes. So what are my lessons from this? Okay, I have some core lessons, right? The first one is that if there's not an organization that can mobilize the collective will, you can't achieve this. In New Orleans, we didn't have an officer that could. In Honduras, Manzanitas could. In Whitesburg, Akashok could. If you don't have an officer that can mobilize the collective will, then you can't understand what it is that the community needs to be empowered. So it's really critical. The second important lesson, right, is the importance of the iterative process. You have to assign an incredible weightlessness to your sense of being and what's important to you, so that you can appreciate the heaviness of the dialogue and the meaning of the community that people want to create. And you can hold them to its exchange value. Why will this be sustainable? How is this gonna, what is the value proposition? What is the market value of this? And you don't ever say, let me tell you what I think. Let me tell you what I feel. Let me tell you what you should do. You can't do that. And the most important point, lesson that I've learned, is that from the onset, it's really, really clear that you set a sunset provision on your association. You must declare that we are going to be committed to work with you for 1 year, and that 1 year is over, we're out. Or on this particular, we're out. Otherwise, you create codependency. So, we're now moving into the second phase, the Culture Hub, and we have to write a new MOU. We're negotiating a new MOU. Because the old MOU did not include that. The old MOU included only asset mapping. And we have provided the asset mapping. Now they want to use it for the economic development. Good, it's a new MOU now. And to make sure that they know it's a new one, I'm not even involved. They write to me, they said, Fluney, I don't even answer them. Because it has to be a new MOU. So, okay, so those are 3 lessons. I'll stop for now, right? So that we can, as people ask questions, I can talk about it. But the core issue is that by strengthening people's capacity to exercise agency, it gives them a chance to create the communities that they value and that can drive their economic development. That can drive their development. Okay, questions? And then, like I said, I'll kind of run through quickly, but I'd be happy to now take some questions. Yeah, go ahead.
I really like this latter part of your presentation because I hear a lot about how you've learned from experience, about like having these limited MOUs.
Yes.
Everybody's
Yes.
clear about what they're getting out of this. I'm wondering if you would speak to the issue of longevity of some of these projects after you withdraw and what you have seen in different places, because obviously you've worked in a lot of very different settings.
Okay.
And I hear in what you're saying a lot of experience. So
Yes.
tell me
Okay.
what characterizes a project that lives on past your involvement and what doesn't.
When they build the confidence in agency and they overcome their resign preferences and they have confidence in their ability to, the skill that they've learned is resilience. Not how to, but resilience. So in Honduras, we built and they planted 30,000 coffee trees because when we just got there, the men just used to go do day labor. Their village was worth $5,000 because that's the sum total of your income. Once they saw that they were 1,200 meters above sea level, and it means that they were getting bugs, and you could grow shade-grown coffee, and they signed a 10-year coffee contract with, exporters, importers from the U.S. And all of a sudden, they planted all these trees, and they planted out vegetables and poultry garden and poultry garden and stuff, and then a hurricane came and destroyed it. And you know what they said? We should have bought insurance. Okay guys, let's start planting. It didn't even rock them. Last time I checked, the value of their village now is $763,000 over 6 years. They now brag. When I go, they ignore me. They brag, and they say when they go to the villages to the Europe, they are no longer hungry. There's no one. And keep their hands there. And the government now charges them taxes because they have an identity, because they are secure. So that has sustained itself. New Orleans did not, because New Orleans had a wonderful project there to do some stuff with them, but what you got was they continued to see government as being central to their lives. So everything that we did and we talked about, the next question was, can we go straight to council person this or council person that, because the government has helped the garden district in the recovery and they better help us too. Government was helping, they better help us too. And so they invested in a kind of entrepreneurism, which we call a kind of a redistributive entrepreneurism. Could we get from Paul for Peter because Mary got two? And so it never ever got to the point of them creating their own wealth and their own agency about what they could do. It was a great idea what they were doing. The first integrated school in the law in New Orleans, which was the center of this place that people had to walk to for mobile things. It was a natural location, natural logistics. We were going to move it from being a McDonald's school to 99 Keys after the most famous listening fast dominoes, and it's going to drive everything and trains are going to come. Why? But they couldn't get to the point of understanding the value proposition that they could drive. Here, I run away from these people right now to operation because they're rusting head on to me. Because they're pretty sure about why it's going to succeed. They want to now negotiate with the 100 schools in America for roadside theater. They want to now make this value proposition for this anti-bullying thing now be something that they now go out to schools all across America with. They want to build this old technology hub, technology culture hub. Since they have all the documentary films and they have all this kind of stuff and all technology, they want to build this and that. But they are ready and asking and including. And I don't count. I'm completely meaningless and witness in their lives. They can succeed. You know what I'm saying? And so to me, it is all about Because then they know how to negotiate with government. Okay, we can do this, here's our value, this is how we think you can leverage your dollars with us. That's the negotiation now. Mr. and Mrs. Department of Commerce, this is how you leverage. For every dollar you put, we create X amount of value. Not, can you give us something this what we can do? And that's what I meant when I said that if you have your capacity for your own agency, and you understand what you can create and what your value proposition can do, then you now have the basis for understanding how government can partner with you. If you don't know, then they own you. Then they become your first call, rather than your last call. Question? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how to phrase this, but what's the role of startup capital for a lot of these organizations? Like, is there any financial support?
It's a great question. You know, there are three kinds of entrepreneurs. There is what we call the Kisner entrepreneurship, which is basically just capturing synergies. So you move resources around, and all you do is you solve the information asymmetry problem. You learn how you can better use existing resources. But then you have the United entrepreneurship, which is you then take risk in an environment of uncertainty. Information is uncertain. You're a Google, this and that. Startup capital partners with risk in an environment of uncertainty. So, marketing and technology, it depends a lot of interest on startup capital. Those ideas, a lot of interest on people who already know that there's a market out there in universities that want to feel an elevated and heightened sense of humanness, and this notion of this data play coming in so we can all get along, because they realize under globalization, one of the most important skill sets of the globalization is the ability to work and reach cooperative solutions. So why not have this group that is already an expert to come and help our community do it? So they get capital that knows that there's a market out there and just want to bring them to market. As opposed to MTM, which now is creating value and they don't know where the market is. But that's where startup capital is coming in. And if you understand that, then you know who you speak to for what type of an opportunity. But understand what's going on here. The fact that they are thinking this way and mobilized to do this means that they are over their bounded imagination or unambitious design preferences. They actually think they're great. They actually think they have all the capacity to do for themselves. And the good thing is, they ain't keeping their beard because they realize it's part of their cultural identity. You know what I'm saying? And so it's an extraordinary thing to observe that I see the emerging confidence. The way now they speak to the foundations, it's about whether you want to be a part of something special. Not we need your money, but do our specialness aligns with your values. We're here to talk to you about it. And do you want to contribute to this articulation of your values? And I see them like, whoa, heavy stuff. But you see confidence, right? And that is what is critical to their development. You can't put them back in the box. I need some of the young people to ask me, yeah?
So what does the process look like for looking into the overcome value education?
Great question. Let me tell you what it shouldn't look like. It should not look like libertarian fraternalism. The way we raise our kids where we are going to teach them to be responsible so one day they can act responsible. It should not be where we are going to be paternal like a parent to teach them how to exercise the responsibility of liberty. No, it doesn't work. That's why some of us will struggle with the development goals. the approach to it, because it's top down. And we may want to see somewhere along that process we enforce the need for people to take responsibility for their actions and own the outcomes. So in Honduras, on 3 negotiation points, I walked away. I asked them a stupid question. They said they want to do this, they want money, and they think because I come from a rich school, they're going to give us money. I walked away. I said, waste my time. So only when they decide that they were going to build this and they're going to use 25% of their returns to build a daycare, to build a community center, and which nurse is going to come every Friday to see the girls in the village. That's all the time I told them that I hear you. Because I'm about development. Not about you just having money in your pocket. Right? And so there's this need to, I'm not afraid of declaring that there are conditions too. In exchange, that's a value for me too. I got students. I want to improve scholarships. I want to go to great lives. I want the lives to be good so that the world is better off when I'm old. I want my students to be empowered and to be change agents. How is working with you going to do that? At any given time, I have 10 proposals on my desk. I know I can't engage in one or two at any given time. How do I choose among those two? I have to look at my value proposition. What does this mean for my students? What's the learning for them? I can't see that. And I walk away. I don't know walk away. It's very easy for me because I didn't come in friendship. And so I don't need to then worry about what do I like to lose friends. I don't have any friends to lose. Answer your question? No?
I guess I'm thinking about how you do that with your own community friends.
In my own community?
Yeah, like I'm from Richmond,
Yes.
and I feel that Richmond has sometimes a mountain in it. A lot of great work is happening.
I've been here for less than 2 days and I'm already sinking in the ground from it.
So my heart will always be here, and hopefully, my heart will always be here. I want to walk away from Richmond. So I'm wondering if there's
In other words, you're choosing voice and loyalty rather than exit. So you're choosing to engage rather than walk away.
Do you have any recommendations for measures?
I would argue, it's a wonderful question. I'd argue that it is not clear to me that there's either transparency or traceability in the cost of actions in which we meaning that people aren't held accountable for what people in leadership. The first issue must be accountability. The second one must be to bring capacity to begin to judge what they've experienced. It doesn't make any sense if you want to change things if people don't understand what's going on. I can't look in a Mercedes engine and tell you there's a Mercedes engine or a Toyota engine because I don't know what I'm seeing. So you can't ask people who are not active citizens, informed citizens, to help you think through what is the value proposition for this versus that option. So therefore, there's no basis of change. Because of information deficit, information asymmetry. And we know in development literature that when there's information asymmetry, then the people in the markets always win. Because consumers have no basis of arbitrage between options. So my quick thing to do would be that if you want to help a company get over their preference and bound imagination, the first thing that needs to happen is that they have to have a strengthened capacity to judge alternative outcomes. They must have a strengthened capacity to do that. You can't have a situation where they must have voice. You can't have a situation where what percentage of each one is black? 50%, 51%? And if you have a high proportion of them having some method, some criminal record which prevents them from voting and participating in the agency, then you already have a problem. Because it means that they can exercise voice of agency over circumstances to affect them. And that's a basis of polarization and unease. So right away you have to fix that problem. So when you see what's going on in Ferguson right now, that's what we see. Polarization. It's not about young man anymore. It's about a community that is broken. And it won't be fixed when every member of that community has agency and voice in that community of theirs. And that's what we're fighting for.
Into that, that's what we're fighting for here too. So I'm going to close because I know other people have other commitments, including our wonderful speaker. Will you please thank him for such great.
Anyone has any questions that they were too shy to ask out loud? Yeah? Like, I know some of the other young people didn't ask a lot of questions, right? So I'm going to ask them all over and ask their questions. Right?
Young people need agency.
Voice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.